Korea fit in? Korea figures actually quite largely in this shift in strategy, because whether it's G20 or trade, Korea was right at the center of both of these things. In terms of the G20 agenda, I mean, Korea was one of the leaders in the G20. It hosted, the G20 summit and became a very important partner of Obama's on a variety of different initiatives around the world. And then on trade, of course, passage of KORUS was a critical part, the most important part of this shift in the agenda towards free trade and towards TPP, and eventually towards FTAP, right, free trade area of the Asia Pacific. So, to me, if you look at the broad sweep of things, there's been a dramatic change in U.S. policy, and it's all culminated in what's now called the pivot or rebalance, however you want to describe it, where the United States is now saying it's going to put much more attention on Asia. I don't think this just came out of the blue. I think this has been an evolution of a policy that has changed over time, where these two elements, the trade element and the G20 element, have been an important part. And Korea has been a very important part of that, since it figures so majorly in both of these two issues.
When President Obama went to the APEC summit in Honolulu, there was an effort to say, look, now's the time to kind of focus on Asia. Now's the time to have a really sustained effort on Asia. This is where our future is. This is where our future jobs are. It was clearly an effort to kind of start getting out of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, try to focus on these longer-term important issues. Unfortunately, I think there was a certain amount of messaging in that which made it look like we were somehow going to make a renewed effort to confront China, and certainly the deployment of a brigade of Marines to Australia was sort of marketed in the U.S. press as some sort of effort to kind of confront the Chinese. Our Secretary of State made very strong statements about China in the context of her trips to Vietnam and then later to the Philippines. And so I think there's a bit of a problem now in the U.S.-China relationship where, not to channel the gentleman who I think was sitting in this seat or the next one, that there's a lack of trust. I think there are some issues there that really need to be improved, and I think if they can be improved, it'll help everybody.
Will global Korea be sustained? Global Korea is associated with Im Young-bak, but we know that every new president in South Korea wants to have their own approach. The global Korea, I think, basket of activities has really, I think, been a source for expansion of and strengthening of the U.S.-Korea relationship, because it has meant that there are a whole set of issues on which the U.S. and South Korea can cooperate off the peninsula. And this is really an interesting new dimension of the relationship that frankly really hadn't existed in this way prior to the last 3 or 4 years.
First, I think we have to dispense with some of the political slogans, we are now back in Asia, and the reality is we never left. And as Admiral Greenert, the current Chief of Naval Operations, has said, he cautioned people against speculating that there would be an increased presence in the Pacific. As he said, it's not a big buildup in the Far East. We're there, we have been there, we will continue to be there. So it's not a new grand strategy. It's really much or most of the strategy is an evolution or a continuation from previous administrations. And as some analysts have pointed out, that there's a lot of similarities if you go to security documents from the Bush administration. And that would be the George Herbert Walker Bush administration. So there's a great continuity of 20 years or so of an Asia pivot, if indeed we want to call it that.